Now we're going to take a look at habituation and sensitization. These are responses that can develop to a single stimulus, like the sound of a train that maybe goes by your apartment every night while you're sleeping. In habituation, we might react less to something. So the more experience with something, the less we react to it. So there might be less fear of public speaking the more often you have to give presentations in class. And generally, if you think of things that you've done a lot, we've tended to become habituated to them. We kind of take them for granted, get used to them. Driving's a good example. The first time that you were driving, you were learning to drive, you were probably tense, right? Most of us are. And so we're tense, we're a little nervous, we're kind of scared. But now that you've been driving for a long time, if you do drive, then you've probably gotten to the point where you're perfectly comfortable doing all kinds of things while you're driving, including some things you might not should be doing. So, we can change the station on the radio. We can sometimes have a conversation and just generally do things that would have been really impossible to do the first week you were learning to drive. So that would be just an example of habituation. Sensitization is when we react more to something as we have more experience with it, typically because our experiences have been unpleasant. So in the case of public speaking, what would sensitization look like? So what would sensitization of public speaking look like? Instead of getting more and more comfortable with it, your fear of it, your reaction, nervousness while doing it would probably increase. So think of habituation as sort of a reduction in how we react to something, and sensitization as an increase in how we react to something. An example of habituation is seen in many animals. They don't eat a lot of food the first time they encounter it. We call this neophobia. So the first time that your dog is given a new kind of food, or any kind of animal it comes across a new kind of food, they probably just take a few nibbles and maybe they'll leave it alone, especially if it's really different from the food that they're used to eating. Then, maybe the next day or half a day later, they'll come by and take a few more nibbles, and then a few more, and so on, until they gradually will get used to the food and start eating it in regular amounts because they've gotten accustomed to it. So the first few bites of some really, really exotic food, you might be a little slow to kind of really chow down, but after you've had this kind of really exotic food for a while, you get used to it, and if you do like it, then you'll eat it just like you would eat anything else. So in habituation, we can see that the intensity of the response declines over the number of experiences we have with it. So we can see here that on, say, the first night in your apartment, you are surprised to hear that the train comes by really, really close at 3 in the morning, and woo, you have a big reaction. You just sit up in bed, wide awake. You have completely startled to the sound of that train. The second night, your reaction is smaller, but still pretty big. Third night, smaller. Fourth night, smaller. So you can see here that your reaction diminishes to the point where pretty soon you're not really reacting very much to the sound of the train. Now, if we think of this reaction to the train during the night is going to diminish, that's habituation, and at some point it's going to plateau. There's only so low that reaction can get, especially if the train is really close. And so you might still stir a little bit in your sleep, might move around a little bit, but you're definitely not sitting up, with your heart pounding in your chest anymore. So at this point on day 6, 7, and 8, you have kind of habituated as much as you're going to. Now notice between days 8 and 9, there's a little arrow here, and that indicates that something new is happening in this case. And this is when we have examples of 2 ways to disrupt habituation. One way that we can disrupt habituation is to take a break. So maybe between day 8 and 9 in your apartment, you go away on vacation for a week. And so you're gone for that time, you're not in your apartment. And when you come back, the train comes by again at 3 in the morning, and bam, you wake up again. So the response might return. So in spontaneous recovery, the response returns or recovers because you've just taken a break. You've been away, you weren't exposed to the sound of the train, and we get that recovery. So spontaneous recovery. The other type of recovery is through what's called dishabituation. In this case, between day 8 and 9, what happens is there's some change in your environment. It might be that workers came in and installed a new carpet. It could be that maybe there was a little bit of an earthquake or something like that going on between day 8 and day 9. And so that new part of your apartment, like the new carpet or new paint or some new event that's happened, could be enough to make you dishabituate, so that on night 9, when the train comes by again at 3 a.m., you have another big reaction. But have no fear, you can see that the reaction will start to decline again. We can disrupt habituation and get a recovery of the startle response through spontaneous recovery or dishabituation. And I've been using startle as an example of the response, but it doesn't have to be startle. So let me show you an example here with some really cute puppies who are going to be reacting to some objects here. So here they're reacting to a broom. And so they're definitely engaged with it. And now the loud noise of the metal dog bowl gets their attention. And they're definitely reacting to it. And the person's going to keep kicking the dog bowl to make noise and give the puppy the chance to habituate, to get used to it. So it stops being such a big deal. And this is critical for all animals, including humans. But for example, for puppies looking to be adopted, one key thing is to have them have gotten used to all kinds of objects and noises, so that when they go to their adopted home, they don't react with fear or anxiety or aggression when they encounter something that they've just never seen or heard before, so that they don't become really reactive to it. So an important part of habituation is to help prepare us, right, for what might happen in our lives. And so for these puppies, they're being habituated to these noises so that they can be prepared for whatever might happen when they get adopted. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. So now they're playing with this toy on a leash. They definitely enjoy that. And we're going to see what happens when the dog bowl is once again slid around the hard surface and makes a loud noise. So they're fine with it. So they react a little bit, but nowhere near as fearfully as they would have if they'd never heard that noise before. So that's the idea, that habituation can help us acclimate to things in our environment so that we don't respond negatively. And we can see the two ways that we can disrupt habituation are spontaneous recovery due to just taking a break, going away for a while. So if the puppies, go someplace where there aren't these typical objects for a while, when they come back, they might have an initial reaction again, but they will once again habituate. We can also experience dishabituation, where if another part of the environment changes dramatically, for example, if a puppy changes their home, you might see a heightened reaction as well.